Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. On behalf of Big Shift Global, welcome to the first webinar of our 2026 Guest Talk series. Today's title is Davos Dialogue, Gas, Power Dynamics, and Global Inequality. As you know, that global leaders gather in Davos to debate energy security, often framed through oil and gas. This discussion asks a more fundamental question: who benefits from the global energy system and who bears its economic, social, and climate cost? Cases such as Venezuela and Iran show that vast fossil fuel wealth has not guaranteed equitable development, but instead reflects deeper entanglements with global finance, geopolitics, and unequal power relations. And these dynamics are increasingly visible globally, from the global south to current debates around Greenland and Arctic geopolitics. So, as fossil gas is promoted as a development and energy security solution, particularly in the global south, this dialogue examines whether it deepens inequality and dependency, or whether justice centered energy alternatives are both possible and necessary. So, today we are joined by speakers who bring global, regional, and movement based perspectives to this conversation. Our speakers are Sophie Richmond, lead at Big Shift Global, and she's working on fossil fuel finance phase out and shifting public finance away from gas. Our another speaker is Mustafa Talpur, Asia Regional Head of Advocacy and Campaigns at Oxfam, leading Oxfam's work on inequality, climate justice, and economic systems in Asia. And today, Oxfam has launched that inequality report. So we are keen to hear that insights from Mustafa. Our another speaker is Aaron Pedrosa from Philippines Movement for Climate Justice, PMCJ, a leading voice on energy, debt, and fossil fuel accountability. And we have also Shereen Talaat, who's lead at MENAFem and a member of the Fight Inequality Alliance. And she's bringing a feminist political economy and global finance perspective. So let's start. I would like to invite Sophie Richmond to set the scene of today's discussion, and she will also tell us why this World Economic Forum appears as more important event this year. And Sophie, from Big Shift Global's perspective, how does gas financing fit into broader power and inequality dynamics we are seeing globally? So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. Really great to see everyone here and looking forward to hearing from the other speakers. For those who don't know, the Big Shift Global is a coalition of organisations around the world calling for the multilateral development banks like the World Bank to get out of fossil fuels and shift this finance into sustainable renewable energy. But we're also calling them out and recognising they're part of a very unequal system rooted in colonialism. And I think this is where this links as well to this webinar that we've got today. Um, and we thought that it would be important to come together and discuss this because we recognise that energy justice is part of a much bigger system. Accelerated climate change, increasing indebtedness, deep inequality are all interlinked. And fossil fuels often lie at the heart of this, as Fisa pointed out in the cases of Venezuela and others. And the World Bank and the other multilateral development banks are part of this system. They continue to promote gas as a transition fuel, and they continue to fund other fossil fuel projects, even while they have a mandate for development, while they've made climate commitments, and while this is using taxpayers' money and putting it into the hands of fossil fuel companies. Around 10 years ago, while I was working in international development, I actually worked on an inequality report where we signaled the interconnectedness of different inequalities affecting people. So not just the economic aspect of inequality, but also inequality related to land, race, gender, climate. And we talked about this idea of the multiple faces of inequality. And I think, sadly, things haven't improved since that report. And I'm sure we'll hear more from Mustafa about their inequality report. But I think this idea of multiple faces is exactly why it's important that we have discussions like this to expose the connections between different levels of and types of inequality and look at how we can work together to break them down. And I think as Davos kicks off, as Fiza mentioned, we can't ignore the influence of this system of wealth and power. We've seen in recent days the World Bank president named as one of the members of the Board of Peace for Gaza. All of these issues that are destabilizing our world are linked more often than not through power and resources. And there's this whole new discourse around security and climate. And there's new frontiers, but also I feel there's new alliances that we can build that can strengthen all of our work. And we need to build this collaboration to ensure that the fight for energy justice is part of this much larger fight for a new system. And I really look forward to hearing the speakers today laying this out and us thinking together about the new ways we can work in this context. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Sophie, for this context, and it's really very important. And now moving towards Mustafa. Mustafa, Oxfam releases its Global Inequality Report each year around the World Economic Forum. And this year, today, it has also launched the same inequality report and making this a particularly timely moment. So, recent debates around Venezuela's oil reserves, Iran's long-standing fossil fuel dependence, and the emerging geopolitical contest over Greenland highlight how energy resources are deeply entangled with power, inequality, and global politics. So, what do these cases reveal about the current global energy order, and how do such dynamics shape economic inequality, climate vulnerability, and energy pathways in the global south and particularly in Asia? We really want to hear very insightful outcomes of the newly launched Oxfam's report. So, over to you, Mustafa.
Okay, thank you, Fiza and colleagues. It's a pleasure to give a brief outline of what Oxfam is doing since last 12 years, and I'm happy that I'm part of that 12 years report as well. So since very first, so it's a big moment, global moment for us to looking into basically economic inequality. As Sophie mentioned, we in this moment we don't look the other multifaceted inequalities. But let me just put few numbers with you, and then I'll come back, Fiza, on linking with how fossil fuel companies and global inequality is linked. It's the same thing. So if we see the last year, despite there was an economic turmoil in the last year, but billionaires' wealth rose 3 times faster to hit the highest ever point in the history. And they got about $18 trillion in the last year, while 1 in 4 people regularly can't afford enough to eat. So this is the World Food Programme's report saying that even the richest countries in Europe and America, there are 92 million people that need the food support. And we have also calculated that billionaires are over 4,000 times more likely to hold political office. So there's a link between the rich people, and the billionaires that are buying politics and have connection to the political office. So they are 4,000 times more likely to hold political office than the ordinary people. And the amount of wealth these people gained by the world billionaire over the last year is enough to give everybody $250 actually. But still then these people will be $500 billion richer. So their fortunes are not going to go away. But it's not the story of money. Now, what is actually happening, these people are buying the politics. It's not new phenomena. They're not. So the rich people are not buying the politics now, but it's now more naked. It's more visible after post-Trump era that these people are buying political power, and it's worrying because it's creating a divisive and dangerously very weak societies. So all over the world, we now see the super rich are using their money to gain political power. So this report that we did, it shows that billionaires are over 4,000 times more that I already said. But in previous report, we have been saying that this billionaire has their personal jet. So in Davos, how many jets are coming for attend the World Davos Forum, or how many super yachts the people have? That is now when we see they are buying the newspapers, or they are buying the politicians, or they are buying the judge, or they are buying the X like Elon Musk, or the Jeff Bezos buying New York Times. It's more dangerous than having yacht. So our level of efforts, or the division that we are looking into, is really becoming very very difficult. If well, I focus on Asia. So if we look into the Asia, the richest 10% take all. So all major Asian economies, we say this is Asian century, Asian economies are booming. But the benefit of the economic growth are taken by 10%. So 60 to 77% of national income goes to the top 10%, while the poorest 50% only get maximum 15% of the national income. Inequality is deepening in Asia. If we look at the countries specifically, the top 10% of the people in India control 58% of the national income, in Thailand 52%, in Indonesia 46%, in Vietnam 43%, China 43%. And we have seen in last 15 years the poorest 50% in Asia are losing the ground. They have lost their income, the share of national income in China, India, Indonesia, Korea. So all the booming economies, poor people are losing the ground. Now, what is the link? Since last 2 years, Oxfam has also tried to release the climate inequality report. What it looks actually, it looks the CO2 emissions by rich people. So the richest 10% that we calculated last year, November, before COP, richest 10% of the world population are responsible of about 48% of the global emissions, while the poorest 50% account only for 8%. If we calculate since 1990, the share of emission of the richest 1% has increased 13%. So 1990 is the period, you all know, the climate justice colleagues, was the threshold level to reduce the 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so they haven't honored that threshold or agreement. Top is actually, these are the unruly people, the top 1%. And their share of emission has increased 13%, while the very top among them, 0.1%, have increased their share of 32%. And the share of bottom 50% has actually fallen 3%. So it's not the poor people to blame, the poorest 50% to blame on the climate catastrophe. It's the rich people. So this is how climate and inequality are so linked, that the more richer you are getting, the more emissions you are actually responsible for through your personal lifestyles or the investments that the rich people make in fossil fuels, basically. So someone in the richest 1% has used over 100 times more of the carbon budget since 99 than someone in the poorest 50%. So what we are actually calling for, so if we look the investment emissions of 308 billionaires, that is total 586 million tons of carbon in 2025. So this is, you look, it's only number. So 308 billionaires, 308 people with billionaire status, they have emitted or contributed 586 billion ton of carbon in 2024. That is more than the combined emission of 118 countries. If they were a country, they would rank a 15th large populous polluting country in the world. Now, so what we are calling now, actually we are calling an excess tax on the fossil fuel corporations. So we calculate that 585 of the world largest and most polluting fossil fuel corporations made 583 billion profit, and they distributed 400 billion to their shareholders, while they cut down their climate investment plans, and they are highly encouraged after post-Trump era. So by taxing these profits from fossil fuel activities, governments can actually redirect profits from shareholders to broader public and help for the climate actions. If you see now, few tech companies control entire global AI and IT industry, and they require more fossil fuel based energy for their data centers and cooling and all of that. And in 2025, major oil and gas corporations cut their target for future low carbon investment. So all of them are cutting their carbon emission targets. BP cut for 73% their investments on the low carbon, Shale by 37%, and Equinor by 41%. We also looked that in 2023, the emissions of just 340 fossil fuel corporations accounted for more than half of all the global emissions. So the rich people are actually the people having more benefits and profits from fossil fuel, controlling and then buying the politics. And that politics is then now what we see in Venezuela and the Iran. So there's a very strong link between fossil fuel companies, the excess profit from them, and the people who are really becoming rich. So what we calculate, the fund required for the climate transition are estimated to be 2.7 trillion per year in 2025, just for the global south. So if the fossil fuel companies are taxed, so what Oxfam is calling for now, rich polluters profit tax. If it is applied globally to 585 fossil fuel corporations, that could raise approximately 400 billion in the first year. So all of you know, when we are in the climate finance debates in the COP, the important question comes where the money comes from. But if we see there's a money there actually, and it's not that you are taxing them to go out of business. I mean, they should go out of business actually, fossil fuel. But even if you tax them, what we call, what we model that a 20% tax profit corresponding to their returns up to 3% and 50% tax on profits above the threshold. With this rate, you can raise 400 billions per year. That is the money that they gave to their shareholders last year. While the rich polluters profit targets most the rich polluter profits in oil, gas, and coal, but in Oxfam, we also advocate for permanent excess profit tax to address wider problem of excess profit across the global economy. So it's not only fossil fuel companies, but other rich companies or the rich people, they are also contributing larger part of the emissions, also have to be disincentivized to spend less. So they should be taxed. So a small group of mega corporations backed by powerful financial sector have pushed global markups from around 7% above in the 1980s level, nearly 60% in 2020, while corporate profits surged to record levels during the pandemic and cost of living. So this excess profit tax would apply to all large corporations other than the fossil fuel with high excess profit, and that can, with the say with the benchmark of 10% return above this level, typically reflects monopoly and their monopoly power, and the gains from the financial fluctuations. Based on the 2024 data of 3,300 big corporations with revenue over 100 million USD, if they taxed this excess profit is taxed at 50%, that can generate 680 billion per year. So if you combine both these taxes, it will be over 1,000 billion or about 1 trillion USD per year just from these two sectors. And these are just few thousand corporations to raise the revenue for the climate finance, but also disincentivize more fossil fuel consumption and the use. So this is the link between the excess growing wealth. It's a fight for fossil fuels. It's creating a climate catastrophe, but now it's also creating a political catastrophe where the hard-earned political rights of the people are being taken away through these rich people buying the newspapers, the multimedia, the digital corporations, and also a repressive scheme. Regimes are being promoted. So the interest of these top rich people are protected. So I think this is the brief, Fiza, and then we can take, if there are any questions later on. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you. Thanks for sharing these, wonderful insights and quite revealing facts that 4,000 times these billionaires are more likely to hold political office. And you also shared the revealing facts of the climate inequality report that only 8% poor are responsible for only 8% of the global emissions, whereas these elites, rich billionaires, they are, holding 48% responsible. So, drawing these examples, it also seems that fossil fuel dependent development models are shifting economic, social, and climate risks onto poorer countries and communities while concentrating power and benefits everywhere. It seems like the current scenario of the world. So now coming towards Arun, turning to the Philippines as a concrete example. Arun, you are an advocate, you are fighting for all these issues which are hiding under that coal and gas power expansion in the Philippines. So how you see this whole phenomena under the example of Philippines, where the rising of debt exposure and financial risk is on the height. Over to you, Arun.
Thanks, Visa. Let me just perhaps divide my sharing into two parts. First, the World Economic Forum at Davos and the Philippine context. We have to somehow acknowledge the fact that the Davos process is not an official process where governments of the different states make binding decisions and represent the interests of their constituencies. Rather, it is a platform where the theme now is in a spirit of dialogue, where billionaires and rich countries actually impose the direction, policy direction of countries like the Philippines, which have ramifications in terms of debt, inequality, the social context that we have to address and contend with. I mentioned that because while we acknowledge the billionaires and their contribution to the climate crisis, the expansion of gas, and the geopolitical implications of these investments, the World Economic Forum is still chaired by billionaires. In fact, the interim co-chair for this year is Larry Fink, the founder, co-chair, the chair, and the CEO of BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager, with assets amounting to 14 trillion pesos. And what we're advocating for is just transition. Larry Fink advocates for energy addition. And in fact, acquired assets from Texas, North Dakota, and ports in the Panama Canal, which leads to Asia. And this is worrisome for us because right now the US is the biggest exporter of gas. And with the recent development where Venezuela has a new president, not the vice president, but Trump, according to Wikipedia, the direction seems to tap into the market in Asia, specifically Southeast Asia, where we are seeing a lot of push for expansion in the gas industry. And this is facilitated with financing from multilateral financial institutions like the World Bank. The World Bank is also represented or is also present at the World Economic Forum. In the Philippine context, we have what we might view as a pivot to our neo-colonial past. You know, what we considered in the past as structural adjustment programs have taken a new phase. And these are what we call now, or what the World Bank packages as the development policy finance or the development policy loans. And our Philippine government has taken the first of its kind for the Philippines, the first energy transition and climate resilience development policy loan in the amount of $600 million. It might sound benign because it's at the policy level, but as any structural adjustment policy or program, it has resulted in the legislation of in the Philippines we call our laws Republic Act 12120, which legislated the development of the gas industry from transmission development to supply. So from a period of policy ambiguity where there were only developed department issuances from the Department of Energy, we now have a law which looks at gas as a clean energy option, as a transition fuel. And from that first DPL, we have our second development policy loan, the second Sustainable Recovery Development Policy Loan Program in the amount of $750 million. And this might have ramifications in terms of further entrenching gas in the energy mix, in the energy policy in the Philippines. Why is this worrisome for the Philippines? Well, it has been cliche for many Filipinos now that the Philippines has been a poster child of the climate crisis. And it is our interest to respond to the climate imperatives of the time. And by officially sanctioning through a law, tapping into another fossil fuel, we are like digging our own graves. And just this morning, the Philippine government announced what they thought was possibly another source of gas for the Philippines for its domestic gas production and consumption. 98 billion cubic feet of gas, 5 kilometers east of Malampaya, that is off the coast of Palawan in Luzon. And this is worrisome again because it diverts the direction of a climate vulnerable country like the Philippines, to look at solutions in the face of intensifying climate crisis, which in turn exacerbates inequality. And the most affected, of course, whenever there is a strong or an extreme weather event are the poorest of the poor, those without the wherewithal to cope, unlike the upper middle class or those with the capacity to adapt. No? And this is the situation right now. And Davos provides that platform for capitalists, for business corporations for the fossil fuel industry to further their agenda. And we're looking at not just a pivot to our neo-colonial past, but a pivot to colonialism itself, with no less the Monroe Doctrine as enshrined in the National Security Strategy of the United States. And the translation, less than a month after it was published, was Venezuela. And and this has implications to our global security in terms of peace and tapping into resources in the global south, like the countries in Southeast Asia and Asia as a whole. That's why the spirit of dialogue, as they flaunt as the theme for the World Economic Forum, is really a business as usual coming together of these billionaires, these big asset managers like BlackRock, to carve the markets for fossil fuel expansion at a time when it should be no longer the case. No? When the imperative is to prepare for what the worsening impacts of the climate crisis. But if you have the likes of Larry Fink, no? The owner, the founder, and chair of BlackRock, and looking at not energy transition but energy addition, and of recent vintage, a departure from his pronouncement of yes, they will address climate change now, looking at energy addition and treating gas as a bridge fuel. It speaks volumes in terms the direction that global finance will tread its course. It is also a sign for global movements across the globe, across the world, or for people's movements such as ours, to prepare for the intensifying deluge of gas expansion projects. And while in the Philippine context, we've managed to stop gas expansion through the expansion of either gas plants or gas projects, we have our own share of billionaires. No? And they are looking at gas as a possible arena for investments, perhaps a reflection, perhaps a microcosm of the global financial architecture, global investment architecture. And because the global architecture provides for the impetus of tapping into fossil fuels, our own billionaires will not look the other way. In fact, despite our more than 800,000 megawatts potential for renewable energy, we are looking at a possible spike of more gas projects in the pipeline. And mind you, this is on top of the agenda being pushed with the resurgence of and the argument for nuclear power. So I'm gonna stop there. I might exceed my time.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Thank you sharing for these very strong examples and also your concerns. And yes, wheresoever these fossil fuel lobbyists are there in the world, whether they are in their country or they are operating at the regional or the global level, their interests are same and they are like one and they are operating in the same way. So thank you for sharing all these insightful your interventions. We are coming towards Shireen. Shireen, drawing on examples such as Venezuela and Iran, where abundant fossil fuel reserves coincide with deep economic and social inequalities, and where the current protest movement in Iran has been prominent led by women demanding rights and accountability, and the emerging geopolitical contest over Greenland's strategic resources, how do energy systems, particularly fossil gas, intersect with gender inequality and broader power asymmetries in the global south? So we really want to hear your interventions. Over to you, Shireen.
Thanks a lot, Fiza, and thanks a lot for the interventions of my previous colleagues, adding to what they already mentioned, and I'm happy that this webinar is taking a very interesting flow. I speak from the perspective of MENAFem movement, and also as part of the Fight Inequality Alliance. So grounded by political economy alliances and feminist research and long engagement with the movements around the Swana region and Global South. Energy systems are not technical systems. Let's agree on this. Not only a technical system, they are systems of power. They decide who controls land, finance, and futures. They decide who live with scarcity and who extracts value from it. So today we are living a new phase from our perspective, a new phase of colonialism, not always uh, uh, not always through direct occupation, but through energy, finance, sanctions, militarizations, and controlling resources. So gas and oil are central to this architecture. And let me be very clear here. What we are seeing in what we saw in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, and what we are seeing now in Venezuela is not disconnected from what we see across the Swana region as well. It is the same logic operating at different levels of violence. Starting with Gaza, what is happening in Gaza is not only a genocide. It's also resource war embedded in a border energy strategy. The destruction of Gaza is not random. It takes places in a context where offshore gas fields exist in Palestinian waters, where plans were circulated for years to control Eastern Mediterranean gas, where energy actually corridors linking the region to Europe are seen as a strategic asset. So energy infrastructures, ports, pipelines are part of the picture. So killing Palestinians, destroying Gaza, displacing its people. This is not only about security, it's about clearing land and sea for control over gas, trade routes, geopolitical leverage, while Europe search alternatives to Russian gas. Energy here is not a development tool, it's an imperial weapon. Um, um, it's and of course women in Gaza carry this violence through survivor labor, through unpaid care under siege, through managing hunger, water scarcity, and medical collapse. Now look at Venezuela. There are no troops occupying Caracas, yet Venezuela sovereignty over its oil is constantly undermined through US sanctions, through assets freeze, through external control over oil revenue and financial flow. And I totally understand the non-democratic situation that the Venezuela was living under and the human rights violation, but that doesn't deny the sovereignty of the people that what I see is now captured by the US controls and policies. So political outcomes are shaped not through ballots only, but through control of energy, income, and access to global finance. This is remote colonialization. Oil becomes the liver, sanctions become the weapon, debt and financial isolation become shockholds. The social costs is absorbed by households, by women managing food and the care work, replacing collapsed public service by informal survivor economies. Um, Now back deeply to the MENA region, gas and oil operate as an imperial arm, not only through extraction, but also through systems built around it. So export-oriented projects and the foreign currency dependency, long-term contracts, excuse me, security arrangements and debt conditionalities. Fossil fuels lock countries into global hierarchies they don't control. This intersects directly with gender inequality. First, price shocks and unpaid care. Gas price volatility passes directly to household through electricity, cooking, and transport, while wages stinks or fall, forcing families to cut food quality, delay health care, and pull girls from schools while women absorb the shock through longer unpaid working days and informal labor. MENAFem documented this across Egypt, Tunisia, Jordan, and Morocco, where energy inflation translates into time poverty for women and exclusion from public life. Second, debt and austerity. Gas is traded in foreign currency. When prices spike to revenue fall, balance of payments collapse. Government borrows and our governments, often under programs shaped by the International Monetary Fund, are forced to run to invest on fossil fuels to be able to pay for the debt service because debt rises and conditionalities follow. Cuts land where women depend most, like in sectors like health, education, transport, food subsidies. The cutting on or desubsidizing energy in Egypt and the transport sector led to killing women in countries like Egypt. And I will share the one of our publications around how debt and austerity kills women in Egypt last year. Different incidents on the un يعني equipped transportations and the unhuman roads that led to killing around 12 young women, farmers going to work. So in Egypt, gas expansions between 2016 and 2022 was under deep subsidy cuts. So طبعا repeated electricity tariff hikes, inflation above 30%, and debt service exceeding spending on health and education combined. Gas did not protect people. It actually this blamed them. Third, look in and lose of sovereignty. Gas infrastructures comes with take or pay clauses, capacity payment, and foreign currency طبعا guarantees that strive future governments of choice and look societies into obligations that outlive climate targets and democratic mandates. Jordan LNG, for example, contracts show how losses or socialized while private suppliers remain protected. Also, exclusions, they are built to exclude by design. Across the region, millions still lack clean cooking access, yet gas mega projects absorbs billions. Data from the World Bank shows clean cooking services a marginal share of energy finance despite its clear links to women, health, safety, and time.
Hmm.
This is not technical failure, it is a political decision. Now we
Hmm.
must confront the role of multilateral development banks.
Hmm.
MDBs legitimize gas through transition narratives. They
Hmm.
de-risk private capital through guarantees that shifts risks to states. They
Hmm.
crowd out decentralized, people centered solutions and they treat gender impacts as optional.
Hmm.
In doing so, they became part of the infrastructure of this remote colonialism, stabilizing extractive and imperial system while claiming development impact. And
Hmm.
let's be clear here: gas and oil are not neutral commodities. They are
Hmm.
tools of geopolitical control. They underpin sanctions regimes. They justify militarization and they discipline entire societies. Energy,
So
yeah.
Yeah, so at this moment of World Economic Forum, what key message regarding that gender and economics we are sending? I mean, what message you really want to deliver? One
Of course.
liner. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we insist on different paths than what is happening. We cannot ignore what's happening in Venezuela. We cannot ignore the imperial power.
Hmm.
So the paths that we are putting on the table here is public finance must serve people, not empires. That means ending fossil locks-ins,
Hmm.
ending guarantees that socialize private risks, investing in decentralized renewables and clean cooking, linking energy to care, food, and health system, making gender and sovereignty outcomes binding. The question here in Davos, for Davos, is not abstract. Who controls energy? Who controls land and sea? And who decide who lives or expendable?
Hmm.
So public money already answers the questions every day.
Hmm.
But it's the time to change the answer to people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shiri, for this wonderful intervention. Yes, do agree that public finance must serve people and not imperials. So now we are opening the floor. All the participants, they are requested if you have any question, if you have any comment, feedback, intervention, please raise your hands and then you can come in, you can speak very briefly. So floor is open. Feel free. Yes, friend, please come in.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly inspiring and really well articulated inputs. Thank you for that. I was just wondering, given this situation, and I was particularly moved by Shireen's comment that energy is not a development tool, it's an imperial weapon, which I completely agree with. Where should we as civil society be putting our efforts right now? So is it about trying to promote the sustainable renewable energy transition that responds to human development needs? Obviously, that also comes with an extractivist kind of wrapper. So yeah, I'd love the thoughts of the speakers on that potential way forwards. Thanks.
Thank you, friend, for your input. Anyone else? Or any additional thoughts our speakers they would really like to add on? Please, you can also add on. Or any final thoughts you really want to, or any message you really want to give at this moment? So Mustafa, Arun, and then Shireen. And friends, floor is open. Please feel free. Just raise your hand and you can just open your mic and come in. Any thoughts, any examples you are seeing of inequality in connection with energy and debt and in lot of issues going on the daily basis we are facing in our countries, in our regions. So please feel free. This is the open forum and you can come in and do your interventions.
If I may, Lisa,
Yeah, yes, Arun.
while I agree to a certain extent to what Shireen and Fran has seconded on energy not being a development tool but an imperialist tool, we cannot discount the fact that energy it should be a neutral value. It should be a public good. In fact, it should be a commons. The problem becomes when it is privatized.
Hmm.
It is in the concept of a private property, such as what is happening now, and profited from by billionaires and rich corporations, that people who need it most not only lose access, but are dictated upon. as to what kind of energy they need, when energy needs should be determined by the people who need them in the first place. That's energy democracy. That's why we have that concept of energy democracy.
Hmm.
So perhaps we should continue challenging that space and reclaiming that space, that energy is a common good, it's a public good. You know? The concept of commons. It should
Hmm.
not be it should not be in a system where the burden is socialized. I think Shereen mentioned something to that extent, and the profits are privatized. And this is what the World Economic Forum um, is ultimately the agenda,
Enhancing.
not just energy, but many of those things that are, by their nature, should be considered public good. And just to the second question about the UN Tax Convention, this is the predicament here. The World Economic Forum is not the United Nations,
Hmm.
but you have the United Nations attending that process. And many of the outcomes of the World Economic Forum, advertently or inadvertently, become part of global policy.
Hmm.
We don't want that to continue, no? Because this is like a group of billionaires saying that we have a dialogue, and that the outcome of the dialogue is what ramifies in terms of public policy in our spaces, in our jurisdiction. They are not democratic. The process is not democratic. It is chaired by a billionaire. The interests on the agenda serve the billionaires. That's why you have rising inequality. So that's
Hmm.
why we must step up, no? And
Hmm.
provide another forum, no? Whether that's the World Social Forum or our own forums, wherever, to continue challenging that mindset where corporations and their lackey government continue to dictate our futures.
Yeah, I agree, Arun, that communities and the common people, they should have an alternative platform like social forum to bring forward their things, their concerns, their perspectives. And this at the Davos. One good thing is this. I don't know whether it is good or not good, but Trump is there. Trump is attending that forum, who has denied the 66 UN agencies and getting free of it, but he's there. Whether and all those UN agencies, they are there, but I don't know whether they all will be that much impactful on those decisions, those corporates or not. So let's see, what are the outcomes of, at the end of the Davos. So, yes, agree that there should be the social forum. And having such kind of platforms for the people where they are coming forward, at least they should have their voices raised, as Mustafa told that these all platforms are all the political offices, they are hold 4,000 times billionaires are holding those offices. So whatsoever, at least common people should have their platforms where they can come forward, as an alternative platforms we should have. So any final thoughts, Mustafa, you would like to?
Yeah, thank you, Fiza, with this very nice conversation. I think energy is the one input to this capitalist machine.
Mm,
That's also a good conversation to have. But the big fight that is coming now is on critical minerals. And the people to fight, the spaces for people to fight are being closed. So governments, as I already said, is protecting the rights of the rich. So
mhm,
there's a democracy on backslide, human rights agenda on backsliding. The political rights that people fought for 200 centuries, you can't get together, you can't assemble now. Even the people are being chased online.
mhm,
The activists are being chased. The governments are using X, Facebook, or other means to chase the rights activists. So it's a fight for alternate economic model. where the energy is one of the input. There should be a feminist alternate economic model that's based on equality. It's not based on fossil fuel, but renewable energy, where consumption is less, where equality is valued, where people's voice is valued. So I think this struggle is a combined struggle where all forces have to come together and fight. But because this our conversation is of course on renewable energy and fossil fuels, so the the path forward as we proposed in Oxfam is taxing the super rich, taxing the fossil fuel companies, so disincentivizing them, but also now fighting for the democratic rights. I think that's becoming more critical. Over.
Thank you, Mustafa. And with this note, we are closing this today's dialogue. And as conversations unfold in Davos, we hope today's discussion contributes to shifting the focus from fossil fuel lock-in toward equity, accountability, and justice-centered energy futures. As Mustafa said, that we really need to develop a feminist economic model based on equality. So thank you to our speakers and to everyone who joined us today. We look forward to continuing this conversation throughout the year. Thank you and take good care.
Thank you. Bye. Bye bye.